Subcommittee and also to our witness panel today. I know that Winter Storm Fern delayed this hearing, and I appreciate that you all made it here through a number of obstacles, so thank you very much. Thank you. This hearing will examine a critical piece of our national infrastructure, the public safety broadband network established by the First Responder Network Authority, commonly known as FirstNet. In communities large and small, first responders save lives every single day, often in situations where each second counts and communication means the difference between life and death. FirstNet was created to give them a dedicated nationwide broadband network that is efficient, reliable, and effective, a network that stands apart from congested commercial systems and prioritizes public safety users first. Today, with millions of connections operating across all 50 states and U.S. territories, FirstNet has become a communications lifeline for police officers, firefighters, EMS, and other first responders. Its unique features like priority access during emergencies are tools that first responders increasingly depend upon. Reauthorizing the network before it sunsets next February means that Congress needs to get to work now. Otherwise, this critical network faces uncertainty, undermining years of investment and trust with public safety. Beyond simply extending FirstNet's legal authority, we must ask, are we ensuring the network lives up to its promise? Recent findings by the Commerce Department's Inspector General raise questions about weaknesses in FirstNet's oversight structure. FirstNet was created as an independent authority within the Commerce Department to balance operational flexibility with accountability. But the Inspector General's findings make clear that the current governing structure has not provided consistent performance oversight. This is not a critique of the mission. It's a call to improve the function of FirstNet authority. First, we need to understand how we got here. When FirstNet was conceived in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, it was a complex undertaking, a national mission-critical network with strict public safety requirements, uncertain economics, and no proven business model. AT&T was the only mobile carrier willing and able to make a bid that met those needs. The company committed capital, technical expertise, and operational capability to build something that never existed before. Without that bid, this network would not exist in its current form. This is an achievement, but it should not be confused with a blank check. In fact, the scale and importance of the public safety assets that AT&T now operates makes stronger oversight more essential, not less. Reauthorization is not about questioning good faith. It is about ensuring that a network built through public-private partnerships continues to serve its core mission with transparency, resilience, and adaptability. Finally, we cannot lose sight of the voice of first responders themselves. Independent surveys show overwhelming support from first responders for reauthorizing FirstNet, not because it's perfect, but because the consequences of losing priority network access, well, it would be unthinkable. FirstNet is more than a network. It is part of our national public safety backbone. Reauthorization gives us the chance not just to maintain continuity, but to improve the network for those who run toward danger so that we can all be safer. Thank you. I would now like to recognize my friend and ranking member, Senator Lujan, for his opening remarks. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Chair Fisher, and also thank you to Chair Cruz and Chair Ranking Member Cantwell for calling the hearing on this critical issue. And thank you to each of our witnesses who are here today. Now, the issues that we're talking about today before this committee are critically important, but I cannot go further without acknowledging what's on the minds of people across the country. One of Alex Preety's colleagues said that, quote, the default look on his face was a smile. Another said Alex wanted to be helpful, to help humanity, have a career that was a force of good in the world. As we all know, Alex is dead. He was killed. Renee Gould's mother said that Renee was one of the kindest people I've ever known. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. She was an amazing human being. Renee's also dead. She was killed. They're dead because of policy decisions made by President Trump, Secretary Noem, and White House Deputy Chief Stephen Miller. This administration decided to ignore the pleas of Minnesota's elected leadership and law enforcement by occupying and terrorizing Minnesota. And when federal agents killed these law-abiding Americans, the administration's response was to call Alex Preety, the VA nurse who held veterans' hands as they died. The Trump administration called him, quote, a domestic terrorist and, quote, would-be assassin. What did they say about Renee Good, a poet, a mother of three? They called her a domestic terrorist. There were many lies by people who have no shame, who seem to take pleasure in terrorizing communities, wrecking families, and dividing the American people. Now, last night, Senator Tom Tillis said what all of us know, that what Secretary Noem has, quote, done in Minnesota should be disqualifying. It's just amateurish. It's terrible. Senator Tillis is right, and Senator Murkowski, who both said Kristi Noem should resign or she should be fired. I'll add one more name to that list, Stephen Miller. Both failed Alex and Renee. Both failed the American people. Now, I ask my Republican colleagues to join Senators Tillis and Murkowski by speaking up and defending the rule of law and defending our shared humanity. What's happening now is not okay. It's not normal. People can't pretend that. We have a chance to work together to do something here. I don't understand why this is hard. Now's the moment for accountability. We owe that to the families who are grieving their loved ones and Americans who feel like they don't recognize the country we're living in. Now, with that, Chair Fisher and Chair Cruz and Ranking Member Cantwell, I'll stop in this space and I ask unanimous consent to submit my prepared opening statement on the topic of today's hearing into the record.
Without objection.
Madam Chairman,
Senator Klobuchar.
I'm here because I'm head of the 911 caucus and I'm interested in this hearing, but I did want to thank Senator Lujan for his remarks about what's happening in my state and just say that I have spent a lot of time in the last few weeks with local law enforcement, not just the Minneapolis Police Chief, but our sheriffs, the Metro Police, and it has become really hard for them to do their normal work. And that's one of the problems with what's happening here. So I hope that having talked to the White House, that in fact they're going to bring these ICE agents out of Minnesota. They've already started bringing border control out of Minnesota, and then I hope we can work together to overhaul this agency. And with that, I'm going to go to judiciary and then come back for my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thank you, Senator Lujan, for your comments. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel of witnesses. Our first witness is Sheriff Michael Adkinson, Acting Chair of the First Responder Network Authority Board. In this role, Sheriff Atkinson leads the FirstNet Authority Board, which oversees the FirstNet network and ensures it meets the needs of the public safety community. Our second witness is Scott Agnew, President of FirstNet and Public Safety Mobility at AT&T. Mr. Agnew oversees AT&T's management and operation of the FirstNet network, which currently serves more than 7.8 million devices nationwide. Our third witness is Cory Davis, Vice President of Verizon Frontline. In this capacity, Mr. Davis oversees Verizon's first responder communications services, supporting more than 45,000 public safety agencies across the United States. And our final witness is Mel Maier, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials International, He previously served as the Vice Chair of FirstNet Authority's Public Safety Advisory Committee. Welcome to all of you. Sheriff Atkinson, you are recognized to give your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Chair Fisher, Ranking Member Lujan, members of the committee. As previously stated, my name is Mike Adkinson. I am the acting chair of the FirstNet Authority Board. But in my day job, I'm a sheriff, and uniquely a sheriff that oversees professional fire rescue, emergency air medical, as well as 911 communications. What we know is that 25 years ago, as you stated, this nation suffered an unimaginable tragedy. And out of that tragedy came the opportunity to be better, to take actions that prevent this happening again. It was the birth of FirstNet. It was the birth of the Public Broadband Safety Network, a network built entirely for public safety to ensure that we're able to carry out our mission to protect the men and women of public safety, but more importantly, to protect the citizens. And that is the ultimate goal of what we're about and what we do. I can tell you in the decade of its existence, almost at this point, I believe it to be a generational success in infrastructure. There are things that I think have made a difference, and I'll reference some of those personally in just a moment, but I will say this. At tens of thousands of agencies, millions of users, the ability to have interoperable communication is critical, and FirstNet has been a success at that. And I'm very proud to be a part of that. As one of the early opt-in states in Florida, we understood that this was critical. We've seen it at multiple hurricane events, unfortunate tragedies, things that sometimes are unimaginable. The ability for our first responders to communicate is without question a priority, and that's what this network is ultimately about. You mentioned the Inspector General report. I would be remiss if I didn't lean into them. I've been on this board for about a year and a half. There were 6 new board members that came in approximately October of last year. And from my standpoint, this is clear that there is one overriding responsibility, and that is to maintain the trust, integrity of the American people and the efficacy of what we do. To that end, we instructed the executive director to lean into these reports, resolve these issues. There is no other acceptable answer than yes. Whatever it takes to resolve these issues, that is what we're going to do. I think we've done a good job of starting working toward that. There's work to be done. Oversight and accountability is critical in any operation, particularly where people's lives are at stake. We do not have the ability to be wrong here. So we have to do what is necessary to improve what we're doing and how we're doing it. You're not going to hear me say anything other than that. It's unacceptable. And if, quite frankly, if you're explaining, you're losing. You just need to resolve problems, and that's what we're about. To that end, as we move toward discussion of reauthorization, I think there are a couple of things that can be considered that I think make practical solutions available to improve the efficacy of what we do. Let me give you an example. I mentioned that there were 6 new board seats that came on. That's an incredibly difficult way to maintain continuity and consistency when you run a board. We'd ask that you consider staggering these terms every 3 years. That was the way the legislation originally intended. Once it got off cycle, the law did not allow, as I understand it, for the secretary to change it back to 3 years. Secondly, we would ask that you consider expanding the role of public safety on this board. There are 3 seats, but we would ask that you dedicate 5 so that the men and women in public safety have a direct and continued priority impact on the reinvestments and where these need to be made. We think that is critical to be successful. And then lastly, in regards to a government standpoint, you know, we use the words accountability and we use the words responsibility. They're not the same thing. They're entirely different things. We'd ask that, as I said before, there's too many captains on this ship. There needs to be an unambiguous line of authority in the way things are done. I believe this board, this authority is capable of making decisions, but we have to have the authority to do that. And finally, I would leave you with this. As a state that unfortunately has suffered hurricanes and will continue, and they will happen again, we don't seek perfection, we seek the effort of perfection in everything we do. And today is the anniversary of the DC tragedy, the crash where 67 individuals lost their lives. And I will tell you that FirstNet was there helping monitor those communications, making a difference and providing opportunities. That is when the system operates at its best. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Adkinson. Mr. Agnew, you are recognized.
Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Lujan, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, and the members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Scott Agnew, and I serve as President of FirstNet and Public Sector Mobility at AT&T. I'm responsible for ensuring AT&T fulfills its federal obligation to deploy, operate, and continuously evolve the FirstNet network for America's first responders. At the outset, let me be clear, AT&T strongly supports reauthorization of the First Responder Network Authority, and we support so doing well in advance of the February 27 expiration. Before FirstNet, public safety relied on fragmented radio systems and congested commercial networks that too often failed during disasters. Congress created FirstNet to solve that problem, and today, FirstNet is delivering that vision. FirstNet represents one of the most successful public-private partnerships in modern infrastructure policy. In 2017, AT&T was selected to build, operate this nationwide public safety network without taxpayer funding. The network was completed on time and on budget in the March of 2023 and continues to grow and improve. Over the life of the 25-year contract, AT&T expects to invest approximately $40 billion of its own capital to build and operate FirstNet. Since 2017, we have built out the network to cover nearly 3 million square miles, making it hundreds of thousands of square miles on average than commercial networks. This is a critical advantage for rural, tribal, and remote communities. Today, more first responders trust FirstNet to reliably communicate than any other network. Importantly, FirstNet provides always-on priority and preemption across Band 14 and all of AT&T's 5G and LTE spectrum. So whether it's planned, like major sporting events, or natural disasters like flooding in Texas or Washington State, or wildfires in Montana or New Mexico, first responders can communicate when networks are congested. In addition, the network will continue to expand. As designed by Congress, the network will evolve based on direct feedback from public safety. The FirstNet Authority has planned to invest more than $8 billion over the next decade to improve the network. This includes delivery of a physically separated 5G core, or work with AST in Midland, Texas to deliver public safety grade direct-to-device satellite connectivity, and FirstNet Fusion, the first mission-critical communication platform that will enable unprecedented interoperability across agencies, carriers, and technologies. The true measure of FirstNet is performance during crisis. During Hurricanes Helene and Milton, FirstNet supported more than 260 emergency requests across multiple states, restoring coverage and sustaining public safety communication when commercial networks were strained or unavailable. And during the assassination attempt at the presidential campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, FirstNet worked as designed. While commercial networks experienced congestions, FirstNet delivered uninterrupted service. These are not isolated examples, they are a result of a network built specifically for and by public safety. AT&T's commitment to public safety is unmatched. We maintained a dedicated FirstNet organization staffed by professionals with public safety and emergency experience. We operated 24/7 security operations center focused on specifically FirstNet traffic, and we provide public safety with a dedicated fleet of deployable assets. Congress made a bold and necessary decision when it created FirstNet. This vision is now a reality, and it's working. For these reasons, we strongly urge Congress to reauthorize the FirstNet Authority and ensure the critical network continues to serve first responders for decades. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Agnew. Mr. Davis, you are recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Lujan, and the members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation today. My name is Cory Davis, and I am the Vice President of Verizon Frontline. I am here representing more than 45,000 public safety agencies nationwide that trust our network to provide the connectivity that they need to save lives. For over 3 decades, Verizon has delivered reliable, resilient, and secure public safety communications. This is a partnership earned not through federal mandates, but through trust developed alongside those on the front lines. We honor that trust with a network built for resilience and our crisis response team led by former first responders. Verizon is leading the industry with innovations like nationwide 5G network slicing. Our technology creates dedicated capacity reserved exclusively for public safety, enhancing priority, enhancing preemption, and quality of service. It ensures first responders have the network access they need during extreme or routine missions. With Verizon Frontline, their mission is our purpose. And as our credo says, we run to a crisis. In authorizing the FirstNet Authority, we must recognize a fundamental shift since 2012. The old assumption that wireless broadband for public safety required a single government-owned network has evolved. Today, when an agency puts out a contract for bid, they have 3 or more robust commercial options. This competition forces us to innovate daily for public safety, driving the development of over 3,000 deployable response assets and enabling enhanced priority and preemption services. No network, however, is immune to failure, which underscores a critical point. National and Homeland Security cannot rely on a single point of failure. True resiliency comes from redundancy and allowing first responders to choose communication solutions that meet their needs. Fostering a vibrant, competitive ecosystem with multiple network vendors is crucial so that if one network faces a challenge, first responders can still communicate. My written testimony offers several specific thoughts on reauthorization, but I want to highlight 3 that are essential for the future of public safety. First, Congress must reinforce resiliency through competition. NTIA should encourage first responders to choose the service that best meets their needs, and over half today choose something other than FirstNet. Congress must ensure FirstNet Authority does not undercut fair competition by portraying itself as the only solution. More can be achieved by promoting multi-network ecosystems, not by entrenching a monopoly. Second, the authority should be responsive to all public safety, not just the customers of one commercial carrier. The 2012 law mandates that the FirstNet Authority money, amounting to tens of billions of dollars, has to be channeled back into the network for the sole benefit of FirstNet subscribers. This made sense when Congress envisioned a single dedicated network. It makes less sense today, where FirstNet rides on top of AT&T's commercial network. If the authority uses federal funds to procure physical infrastructure, like towers in a rural area, access to those assets should be available to all public safety providers. And federal funds should support all first responders, regardless of what commercial carrier they choose. Third, Congress must strengthen oversight and transparency. The FirstNet Authority has faced persistent operational challenges as outlined in the 20 Inspector General reports. The reports have identified missed milestones, overpricing, bad investments, network failures, and whistleblower retaliation. Reauthorization is an opportunity to expand NTIA's oversight role. We also agree with the National Sheriff's Association and the Major State Chase Association that the authority should be subject to regular congressional review. In conclusion, let's take stock of what has worked and what has become outdated. Local public safety officials deserve the right to choose the service that best meets their needs and should benefit from the FirstNet program regardless of that choice. First responders collectively benefit from competition in a multi-network ecosystem, giving them the most resilient and reliable communications. Ask yourselves, like we ask ourselves, what is best for public safety professionals that put their lives on the line every day and require the best, most reliable communications possible? I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Maier, you are recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Fisher, Ranking Member Lujan, members of the Subcommittee. Thank you for this invitation to testify before you today, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk about APCO International. APCO International is the world's oldest and largest public safety communications association dedicated to public safety communications, starting in 1935, when the technology of the day was AM radio. And when I recall being a Detroit area resident myself, of KOP radio was one of the first broadcast stations out there that gave Detroit police the opportunity to
be on the lookouts, and calls for service, all while playing music between the calls because they had an entertainment license for AM radio. How we've evolved since then. We have more than 45,000 members across the United States, in Great Britain, in Canada, across the world. We operate public safety communication systems for law enforcement, fire, EMS, and other public safety associations. And with more than 3 decades of public service behind me, I have built a career focused on leadership in law enforcement and public safety. I was appointed the CEO and Executive Director of APCO International in July of 2023. Prior to that, I had served as CTO, managing public safety telecommunications from that technical side. Prior to joining APCO, being in law enforcement for 32 years, I was a captain with the Oakland County, Michigan Sheriff's Office. I ran the communications and 911 system and the P25, that's APCO Project 25 radio system in Oakland County for 6,000 subscribers. One of the things that I found that during that is that we found that we needed public safety broadband. And when we looked at national public safety broadband many, many years ago, we learned that there was an opportunity when we looked at this Band 14 option to look at what public safety can do going forward, and FirstNet was created. I was part of the FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Committee. I had an opportunity to work on the executive committee representing law enforcement and helped guide the network's development and implementation for first responders nationwide. APCO is uniquely qualified to offer an informed perspective on FirstNet's performance. In 2009, we were part of the public safety leadership that urged Congress to establish this dedicated interoperable network. It had to serve the needs of public safety. That's it. That was it. Serve the critical needs of public safety in a manner that could happen nationwide. Very ambitious. You mentioned that in your opening statement. That's what it was, and it's a success. We're here today to say, celebrate that success. We continue to serve a role giving guidance through the Public Safety Advisory Committee as APCO International. Our feedback goes directly to the board that goes back into the FirstNet Authority to help build out the services, products that we need in public safety. APCO urges the swift reauthorization of FirstNet because quite simply, lives depend on it. Millions of public safety professionals, including APCO members, depend on FirstNet services and equipment in support of their life-saving missions. We use it every day. I used it in the field when I was a captain with the Oakland County Sheriff. I used it as a commander when I was running the communications center to backhaul next generation 911 technologies, over-the-top applications, and to push it from the call taker to the dispatcher to the field units. FirstNet works. We always have to be the first in line when congested networks appear. FirstNet has done that. We continually look to the future and consider how we can make it even stronger. And at the forefront of this is the central question, what would serve public safety? That's the only question we need to ask. And guided by this, we would urge you to continue that reinvestment in the FirstNet network. Continued expansion, it's essential to ensure that the FirstNet coverage reaches rural, remote, and underserved communities. Where it doesn't exist today, it should exist tomorrow across America. The smallest of the small emergency communication centers, 911 centers, the police, fire, and EMS, no responder left without this reliable connectivity. Maintaining and improving these network performance and reliability must remain a top priority. This includes ensuring that consistent coverage, minimizing downtime, and continuing to provide this predictable, high-quality service occurs. We encourage that reinvestment and growth. Now, we consider this, that when Congress considers the adoption of performance metrics and optional benchmarks that address real-world public safety needs, do it on the behalf of latency, of coverage, of ensuring that we can get the products and services we need. I want to thank you for advancing this important conversation about FirstNet reauthorization. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Maier. We'll start now with questions from the members of this committee, 5 minutes. Competition, where feasible, can be a safeguard for the public, and that includes driving innovation and choice for government partners. Mr. Maier, You've mentioned that FirstNet has already spurred more competition, such as for device costs. Do you believe that there are additional areas to introduce competition within the FirstNet system?
I think that what has happened is amazing. We had no one competing for public safety's attention when cellular networks were first formed. I carried a bag phone in my patrol car. I was quite cutting edge. I had 15 minutes a month to use, so I couldn't go over. Competition became part of the FirstNet package. When priority and presumption was presented, we had that wireless priority system, the GET system, all those things that the federal government was providing, they're now available through FirstNet.
When you look at the future, though, what do you see as additional devices?
Additional is going to be the continued support for new devices and new technologies being merged into the networks. Competition that can lower costs, competition that can increase the bandwidth and the spectrum that we're using, as well as really coordinating efforts that help predict better outcomes in the field. Communicating against those three networks is terrific. Verizon Frontline, thank you. T-Mobile, T-Priority, that's terrific. FirstNet, that is terrific. Let's get them out in the field and in people's hands.
Okay, thank you. Sheriff Adkinson, if there were more providers within the system, would there be network security trade-offs if you have more providers in the system?
So I think
how secure would it be?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things to consider when we talk about that. The reality of it is that I don't want a situation like tyranny of the commons, right? But when it becomes everybody's responsibility, it becomes no one's responsibility. From an authority standpoint, there has to be very clear lines of delineation of who we hold responsible for outcomes. That would be a challenge. Just bluntly, that's a challenge. Having said that, every option should be reviewed if it's to the benefit of the people we serve. So I don't think that there's anything you would ever say 100% no to, but I always am very reticent when we talk about entering into a closed system, leaving the opportunity to point fingers. And I think the responsibility of the authority is to hold people accountable. I mean, I think that is the sole purpose of it. I'm actually agnostic to the providing of it, quite frankly. That's not my job to decide, pick winners or losers. My job is to make sure, the board's job is to make sure that we get a delivery of service that meets the needs of the people we serve.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew, earlier this month, there was news that AT&T decided to work with a new satellite partner to plug the gaps in the FirstNet mobile network, and I'm interested in the process that you used to select this partner. Did AT&T seek proposals from other operators to provide this satellite component of the FirstNet system?
Yes, Senator. We evaluated.
Is that information available to members of this committee?
No, that's a private RFP with the vendors, and we evaluated that solution, and we selected the best solution for public safety that would basically provide the highest level of connectivity, capacity, resiliency, and performance.
So those were your selection criteria?
That's correct.
Is the deal exclusive, or will you be considering other providers?
Currently, the deal from a direct to cellular, from a satellite perspective, is with AST. We currently use multiple satellite providers as part of our deployable program. So specific to direct to satellite, it will be AST, Senator.
And what's the length of a contract?
I'd have to get back to you on the specific link, Senator.
Okay, thank you. No carrier is immune to outages, Mr. Agnew. We saw Verizon have a major outage across their network. We saw a serious AT&T outage last February. It took down FirstNet. Will you please explain to the committee how AT&T has implemented changes since that 2024 incident and what that means for FirstNet's reliability as we move forward?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Senator. And after that outage, well, first of all, we prioritized FirstNet over other elements in our network, and the network was up and running for public safety in 2 hours. Subsequent to that significant oversight by the authority, by the OIG, we are held accountable to the highest standard, the only network held accountable through oversight and after-action reports. We subsequently communicated exactly what went on. the action plans to address, and we addressed and actually hardened that network. We are obligated by the contract, we are obligated to the oversight to continuously answer that call.
Mr. Davis, do you have anything to add? As
Yeah.
representing Verizon?
Yeah, what I'd add is Chairman Fisher, is, competition is good for public safety. And in the state of Nebraska, we have 52% market share. So over half of the first responders in New Mexico, in Nebraska, are choosing Verizon Frontline for their carrier of choice. So, and I would say the same around the network outages. This is why we're here. A single-threaded system is a huge concern for national security if we have all of our eggs in one basket.
Thank you. Senator Lujan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Agnew, the contract that AT&T has around FirstNet is with the federal government?
That's correct.
It's paid for with taxpayer dollars?
No, it's not. There's no taxpayer appropriated dollars. It is all self-contained and self-funding through the sustainability payments made by AT&T.
Do you have to make your service available to a government entity to review?
That's correct, we do. We have to make eligible to government, or you're talking the contract with me, Senator?
You just responded to Chair Fisher in saying that some of the information that was asked to share with this committee, that it's proprietary. I don't understand how the hell that's possible. You have to share information about how this helps the sheriffs and police officers and first responders, whether it's with a satellite company or if it's with the people you buy coffee from. That's for FirstNet, man. And so that's all my questioning. I'll come back to you. We can respond in the record. So I just hope that we can get to a place when we're talking about federal contracts, information is shared here. And like the chair said, this is an empty check.
Right.
We need to make sure that we're delivering the best service to everybody involved. So my question, Mr. Maier, in your testimony, you state that, quote, FirstNet must remain resilient, secure, consistently available so that public safety professionals can rely on it without interruption. And I completely agree with that. Now, the reality is that communication networks have outages. That's something that both the chair and I have now shared. We saw it recently experience a nationwide outage of Verizon's network and in 24, and a nationwide outage of AT&T's network that also took FirstNet down for several hours. Just a couple points that I referenced. My question to you is, how do the public safety officials prepare for these expected and unexpected outages?
One of the things that we do well is we plan. As a first responder, one of my jobs is to make sure that I had more than one way to get things done, more than one tool in the toolbox. One of the things that we've seen is that the emergence of land mobile radio, LMR radios, with these push-to-talk solutions over the air of LTE have expanded that capability of our land mobile systems, our LTE systems, and that is a convergence that's still occurring today. Secondly, we look at some of the public safety UHF, VHF systems out there that are really working on these high band capacity, working with those folks that are really experts at radio. Those are backups to LTE also. We use data systems, we use public safety communication systems that are closed networks, sharing logical or diverse paths of physical. But those backups are only backups as they continue to need to be used. Those are redundancies, and it should flow seamlessly. We want that to be seamless. My device right here, this phone can go between Wi-Fi and the commercial radio system seamlessly. I'm talking on a call, I don't even know it. That's what public safety systems are designed to do, and they fall back, they fail over. Building upon that, we need to invest in better resiliency. The run times of these generators and these batteries at these remote sites, they lose power during a crisis. How long do they run? Those are things we need to know. Can they step up when the surges happen, when we have large volumes of people? We have many first responders on scene. Can the capacity then be carried too? Those are issues that we deal with by preparing for those, by having alternate means of communication. We're using service as a software that we're taking down from the cloud. We're using satellite. We've been doing it for 30 years. Those are things that we plan for and we prepare for, so when these outages happen, we're ready to communicate. If it has to go back to turning a light on in the front of the substation so that when you're driving by you have a call for service, we'll do that too. And that's how it used to work. But one of the best parts of your question is really about reliability and resiliency in planning. Public safety has direct input into the FirstNet network. That is it. They have direct input through the Public Safety Advisory Committee, the board, back to FirstNet on how those things are done. We're part of that planning process.
I appreciate that, Mr. Maier. I have other questions for the other witnesses on preparation for outages. I'll submit them into the record, and then I'll give you time to respond to them as well. You know, Mr. Maier, you held up your phone there. There's some law enforcement that have an agreement with AT&T. They have an agreement with Verizon. They have an agreement with T-Mobile, and they're rolling with 3 phones in their cars, and they're just trying to figure out who the hell to call. Maybe that's something that these companies can figure out as well, so that way we don't have roaming. When someone picks up the phone, they want someone to answer. They don't have time to keep rolling through all of those devices as well. Now, all of you testifying here today have acknowledged the multiple reports from the Commerce Department's Office of the Inspector General. The reports have raised serious concerns about FirstNet's authority's oversight in its contract with AT&T, including failing to independently verify coverage claims, modifying performance metrics, build-out requirements, on and on and on. Mr. Maier, do you believe Congress needs to strengthen FirstNet's oversight framework? And if so, any specific guardrails? And as my time expires here, maybe what I'll just do is ask for you to submit that into the records. I can be respectful of my colleagues' time as well. But I have some others I'll submit into the record, get to all of you as well. I really appreciate your time being here today.
Thank you. And we do believe that oversight's a feature of the program. It's not a flaw. It's good business.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Lujan, and we may have time later for a follow-up round too. Senator Moreno, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Maier, you talked about your phone and take that question from communications. In Ohio, the state spent a lot of resources to build what's called the MARCS network, which is a land mobile radio communication system. That does not have interoperability and seamless transition with FirstNet. Explain how you see that as a problem.
One of the challenges we've seen with over-the-top applications and push-to-talk interfaces that they are not based on commonly accepted standards today because they are unique to the manufacturer of the radio, to the manufacturer of the subsystems, but we know that they can be. They can do those workarounds. The MARC system is terrific at land mobile radio. There's no question. In Oakland County, Michigan, we had a P25 radio as well as before that a Harris radio. We had Motorola and Harris. We were able to use these devices to connect them to push-to-talk solutions over the air. Take advantage of LTE, but it was unique, it was expensive, and it's not something everybody can do. Those are things I would defer to the FirstNet team on how they see that. I know that they've got a product that they're offering, and I've looked at it, I've seen the information on it. It looks like it has a great opportunity to take all of those divergent things and put them into an interoperable cloud to share information. But I would have to defer to them on that, sir.
But my point asking you first about that was it's obviously critically important for first responder, right?
Yes, sir.
And so obviously jumping to you, Mr. Agnew, Mr. Adkinson, what is AT&T doing about integrating the MARCS network into FirstNet? I'm sorry, Mr. Agnew, AT&T, sorry about that.
Senator, thank you for that question. We're very familiar with your network. It's a very strong land mobile network in Ohio. We actually are in the process, as I mentioned in my orals, is launching a product called FirstNet Fusion. This is taking interoperability to the next level. The foundation of the networks, interoperable between commercial networks. The next phase is making it easier, more affordable, and scalable for land mobile radio networks. Fusion is going to transform public safety interoperability because it is not going to matter the network, it's not going to matter the carrier, it's not going to matter the technology. And we're actually working with your state to demonstrate how we're going to make that a reality. We are going to take the interoperability, as Mr. Maier was saying, and put it in the cloud. That makes it more affordable, and that makes it easier to manage. As you have disasters come, and you have mutual aid come, as you very well know in the state of Ohio, where you have multiple agencies converging. Today, they are configuring radios. It could take hours, it could take days to get that communication set up. You need to be able to do it in seconds, and that is the commitment.
So what would be the timeline for that to happen?
It's launching in the first half of the year.
Of this year?
Yeah, yes, sir. And we're actually, like as I mentioned, having discussions with your leadership there, your public safety.
Are you confident that by this time next year, we should have that fully integrated as the way Mr. Maier described on his phone?
I'm confident the technology be available, and I'm confident it'll be ready. We'll be working with the MARC system because there's some implementations they'll need to make on their side. But I am confident in the product.
Good. Well, that's good news for Ohio. Taking off of the question from Senator Lujan, where he asked about taxpayer dollars, and you said it doesn't fund it. Technically, that's not 100% accurate. Didn't the federal government put $6.5 billion into this program?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me the chance to clarify. There was auction proceeds, spectrum auction proceeds that initially funded the program and helped with the build-out. Subsequent to that, sustainability payments are made by AT&T in the amount of $8 billion, and that is what is used to fund the authority and make the necessary public safety investments. Now, let me be clear on what the investments are. They're specific to FirstNet, specific to the FirstNet elements. They are not for AT&T to run their network. AT&T operates the complete network, our network, as well as the FirstNet network as well, which has a complete dedicated core that needs to be operated. So
Right. No, and again, I think what Senator Lujan was pointing out, not to speak for him, he can speak for himself, is that there's a significant amount of taxpayer money that went into the $6.5 billion. The monthly subscriptions are with local governments, correct?
that is correct.
So that's taxpayer money. And I think that was the point that was being made. I just wanted to give you a chance to clarify that, because this is definitely taxpayer money. And I think when you're spending taxpayer money, there is a different standard for disclosure. I think you have private contracts for anything that you do, but once you're asking the taxpayer to fork over money and pay it to a private company, then there is a responsibility on disclosure. And I just wanted to make certain that we clarify that for the record. So I appreciate that, and my time is up.
Thank you, Senator Moreno. Senator Hickenlooper, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank all of you for being here today, but also for your public service. Let me start with Mr. Adkinson. As you know well, Boulder, Colorado is home to many federal labs that improve our communication service. Institute of Telecommunications Sciences, ITS, Public Safety Communications Research Lab at the National Institute of Science and Technology campus in Boulder, and then the FirstNet Authorities Lab. Now, at the FirstNet Lab, science and engineers do the R&D and perform a whole variety of tests to ensure the public technologies, so things like drones and mobile towers, are seamlessly integrated across the network. This research, I guess you call it cutting-edge research, is possible because of the state-of-the-art facilities and the equipment, and also, and especially, due from the highly trained workforce that's there. So, as board chair, Mr. Adkinson, how is FirstNet Authority recruiting and retaining the best engineers and the best scientists at the Boulder Lab to make sure that our public safety communications network performs as intended?
Thank you, Senator. Obviously, you're talking about some of the most technical and capable communication professionals there are, right? And at the end of the day, we reinvest back into our staff because similarly to our vendor, AT&T, we understand that to move to the next level, whether that's Z-access, whether that's an implication of singularity between LMR, land mobile radio, and these things, it is critical to have the best and brightest. Now, as far as how those folks are retained and hired, I have to defer that to NTIA. That's more in their area of operation. But I have to tell you, there is quite a bit of discussion among the board, and I'll segregate that among the board to say, are we being competitive in hiring the best and brightest in what we do? Because that's what it takes to drive this forward. And from a taxpayer standpoint, to Senator Moreno's point a minute ago, these are still public funds, i.e. it's the public's trust, right? These fees are the public's trust. And so the board takes that very seriously, that part of this technology at that lab is to make sure that we are getting the best technology from our vendor as well, too. So I think it's an opportunity to maintain the best and brightest. That may be something from a salary standpoint, recruitment standpoint, I may have to go back to NTA on that, but I absolutely concur that that's what we need.
And as the network modernizes its towers and network core to improve service to first responders, what role do you see for FirstNet's lab, what's that role going to play as this modernization goes forward?
I mean, listen, Moore's Law is roughly, 18 months on obsolescence. The way things are changing now, I think the lab is going to be at the cutting edge of determining what is capable and what are we envisioning. Because I can tell you, even 6 and 7 years ago, AI was not part of this discussion. It will be part of the discussion going forward, both from a national security standpoint as well as the service we provide to our members. We haven't talked about it, but there's the Internet of Things. And sometimes when we're talking about all these different lines of service, I think people forget that it also includes video cameras, things like body cameras. I saw a board member who is also a doctor as well, able to perform, medical assistance from 800 miles away.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That is what's coming.
Absolutely. Let me switch over to Mr. Agnew, Mr. Davis. So whether someone's hiking in the mountain ranges above Telluride, or they're watching a hockey or a basketball game in Ball Arena in downtown Denver, Colorado's first responders are almost always on the front lines of keeping our citizens safe. So in public safety emergencies, reliable wireless communications can mean the difference between lives saved or a tragedy striking a community. And that's why transparency, I think, in how communication networks are managed and upgraded is so essential. So, Mr. Agnew, Mr. Davis, in delivering communication service to public safety leaders, how would you describe your process for demonstrating where your network coverage is densified and where it really needs upgrades, specific geolocated upgrades?
Senator, thank you for that question. And FirstNet has unprecedented transparency as we provided, and thank you, Governor, at the time for opting in. We provided state plan portals to demonstrate the exact build over the course of the initial 6 years. We've also provided what's called a network status tool that public safety can look real time where existing coverage is. In addition, through outreach by the FirstNet Authority and AT&T network coverage workshops, we show the public safety community. In Colorado, it happened on September 25th, where the coverage has been built and where the coverage is going. Also during that time, public safety gets to identify the areas where they build what we call public safety specific sites. These aren't sites that are economically viable for AT&T. These are where public safety needs it. And so as part of the $8 billion reinvestment that FirstNet is making over the next 10 years, that is where that sites are going to come from. That is why FirstNet has nearly 3 million miles square covered and 200,000 more. And in fact, just in the opt-in process alone, just commenting on Colorado, you had 31 specific sites that were built based off of direct feedback from public safety, not corporate AT&T.
Good to hear that.
That's a great question, Senator, and I've spent a lot of time in those mountains in Telluride, so I know very well those challenges.
Lucky man.
So some of the things that we do is we have a process around transparency and capturing customer feedback. We do quarterly roundtables with public safety professionals. So in your great state, we have nearly 50% of the market share. So over 50%, or nearly 50% of those first responders are choosing something other than FirstNet. So it's important to hear that feedback on what's working and what's not working. We also have a wireless network performance tool that shows coverage where you can request physical assets if you need deployable assets. We also work very closely with all the states on the coverage. And this is why it's so important that competition and innovation is important, because if FirstNet Authority funds a tower, let's say in rural San Juan County, all public safety providers should be able to take advantage of that tower, not just one commercial carrier.
Fair enough. Thank you. I yield back the floor.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Budd, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for holding this hearing. Thank you all for coming up and being part of this panel. Very helpful. We remember about 15 months ago, Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. There's some at the table here and some in the audience that I reached out to in those early days. Thank you all for your responsiveness. I know there's lessons learned, and we'll ask about that in a moment. But we do remember how significantly disrupted connectivity was, including infrastructure and strained networks, 9/11 call centers. But I was impressed with the efforts of everybody involved, including FirstNet, Verizon, other carriers, especially our first responders. So Sheriff, thank you for being here. Thanks for those in uniform today for what you do, not just with improving first responder communications, but what your roles in law enforcement as well. So Sheriff, your testimony spoke to how FirstNet's 50-member board and the Public Safety Advisory Committee has kept first responders like yourself deeply involved in the investment and build-out decisions for FirstNet. And FirstNet's fusion seemed like a good example of prioritizing technological upgrades to keep pace with commercial innovation. So are there areas FirstNet reauthorizations needs to look at to continue to enhance efforts to make sure a nationwide first responder network is keeping pace and giving responders the best tools they need to be successful?
Thank you, Senator. I think a couple of things are pertinent in this discussion, which is, again, the rate of technology, the way things are changing. Products like Fusion give us the opportunity to get what was the ultimate goal here, which is interoperability on demand, right? And I made a joke earlier today, and I'll stand by it, which sometimes words have multiple meanings. My children love The Princess Bride, right? And sometimes people say interoperability, and I say, don't think that word means what you think it means. And the problem is we can ask multiple people and get different answers, right? But from a first responder standpoint, a product like Fusion, once it is built out, and the future of things like that, can result in instantaneous connection between multiple modalities. That is the goal. And so when you're asking what we should be investing in, as well as extending coverage and making it better, deeper coverage, products that allow that instantaneous change, this leveraging of technology is the things that I think that the FirstNet Authority Board should be pushing toward. And I don't think you're going to hear anybody argue against that. I mean, I think that is the driving future.
Thank you for that. Mr. Agnew, your testimony talked about lessons learned during Hurricane Helene and also Hurricane Milton. Could you say what some of those lessons were? I know you've shared earlier, but if there's anything else you'd like to add as far as lessons learned, and how do those lessons inform AT&T's work with the FirstNet Authority in determining network investments?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for that question. Lessons learned, it was a massive event, multiple states, over 260 requests, and as we do a hot wash is what public safety does after an event. And there were almost 89 requests that came in within the first 24 hours. And so that was a lot to triage. So we've determined that we needed multiple triage teams to speed those up. So we've subsequently changed that. Additionally, we realized we needed more smaller assets to be able to manage that type of event, to be able to respond quickly. So we've made the subsequent investment. The other area we saw is that public safety supported the event. They have their own deployables that they purchase. Your state, Tennessee, federal agencies came to the table for mutual aid. So we needed to put out, and we've subsequently done that, more affordable solutions so public safety can put their own coverage out there as well. How we work with the authorities, we talk about that event. We talk about what investments we can make, and we heard from the last House committee from North Carolina discussing just that resiliency, that reliability, more deployables. So we're in discussions with the authority right now to make those investments for the deployable program.
Yep, thank you very much. And I think most of those 89 requests were from me, so appreciate your patience then. Similar question, Mr. Davis. What takeaways from Helene did Frontline have to inform the future investments? And did the fact that Frontline was available as an alternative first responder network, did that improve outcomes?
Yeah, Senator, that's an important question, and it was great to see you and meet you at our event and rally a few months ago. I know the team really appreciated it, and so did the community. I'll tell you this, Senator, I was boots on the ground about 72 hours after Helene hit, and like my colleagues at AT&T, we had hundreds of requests coming in from 7 different states. I spent time in Buncombe County in the EOC. I spent time in the EOCs in Asheville, and I spent time with law enforcement who were pulling bodies out of the mud and did not have any network capabilities while we were trying to facilitate drone missions to provide these flying towers in literally the middle of nowhere, and then working with the Army Corps of Engineers to get radio equipment up on Mitchell Mountain because it was completely wiped away. The lessons learned was around communications and partnerships and how important it is to have that streamlined communication. And it really is, and we are so proud to serve on the primary side, nearly 52% of your constituents, Senator Budd. And the other thing that we've learned is how important it is to do, what you heard here with the hot wash. We call them after action reviews. We did one internally on how we can do better, but we also do that with your local agencies as well. That way we maintain that continuity and we maintain that communication throughout. And God forbid that there's another storm, but if there is one like Helene, we'll be ready and more prepared than ever.
Fantastic. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Budd. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you
are
very much,
recognized.
Madam Chair. We have had a lot of tragedies in my state this year, but one of them that I didn't discuss earlier was the murder of Melissa Hortman and her husband. And it's relevant here because there was a manhunt like no other in our state that went on for days. And the first responders were able to rely on FirstNet to communicate. They did find the now defendant, and he was not able to kill anyone else despite shooting another legislator and his wife 15 times and going to several other houses. Mr. Maier, what metrics do you believe that FirstNet should rely on to evaluate network performance and reliability? And why don't you answer that?
I would like to note and say thank you for your support for Next Generation 911 and everything that you do to help us. Operational performance under stress, that's what we're talking about. The public safety has to have the tools they need during the crisis. Latency, when we're talking about voice, push-to-talk setup, video delays, are the packets moving through so mapping and AVL can get the job done? Throughput, uplink, downlink. We use uplink in the field. First responders use uplink more than they do the downlink. They're sending data back. We look at cell edge performance. On the edges of those maps where they say that there's coverage, is it actually performing? The priority activation times, the preemption metrics, those are important. Are they working? We also look at quality of service. We look at the times when, how are these things moving forward? I also have mentioned before power backups. Are these batteries? Are these generators? Are they moving forward? And think about cybersecurity. Are we doing everything we can to keep the network safe? Are we introducing new vectors?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. You noted I actually co-chair the 911 caucus with Senator Budd, and we've introduced legislation to update some of these outdated centers, the related technology, the fact that everyone's using text messages. And this is all, when I was the DA, county attorney for our biggest county, we had, not in my county, but another one, there was a horrible shooting of a police officer. And that was when we realized that the responders to the scene, tracking down the killer had 10 different radio. It was a mess. And that's what made our state, at least in the metros, the counties got all on the same network, and we greatly improved things. But now, we're in this next moment where we have to look at the new technology and get there. So in your testimony, you said that FirstNet should provide network coverage to even the smallest of the small emergency community centers, communication centers. Do you agree that updating our 911 centers is critical?
It is, ma'am.
And can you talk about how first responders, how important it is for them to have this kind of information, especially when they're in smaller rural areas?
It is information and situational awareness. It protects the responders and it also protects the callers. We need that information into the 911 centers through the best ways possible. Those can include answering the call, getting the metrics, getting the information, getting all that, but then what do we do with it? How do we share it? Having those IP networks, those next generation 911 technologies interfacing with FirstNet gets the job done.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew, do you want to just talk about that rural issue and how broadband, as you know, the BEAD money, we've recently got some of that has been announced is going to go out, and talk about what steps AT&T does to ensure that rural communities are covered under the FirstNet network.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. So as part of the opt-in process, so each state had to select FirstNet. They could have chose to build their own network. Each state and each territory chose to do that. As part of that process, 1,200 sites were built. not based off of AT&T selecting, it was based off of the voice of public safety. So that further expanded the network. Also, as part of the obligation of the FirstNet contract, 15% of the network had to be built with rural partners. So states like Nebraska and other rural states received more than 2,000 locations. Their tribal lands grew by 66% in coverage. There are tribes in this nation that are making phone calls for the first time. And then, of course, with the addition of the investment from FirstNet, they just approved an additional 137 sites based specifically off of public safety feedback. States like California, states like Kentucky, states like Alaska, Hawaii, all states being addressed based off of feedback. So that is what's making a difference. It is not a carrier building a network. The carrier is building the network as the contractor, but it's public safety's decisions, and that is controlled by Sheriff Atkinson and his board and the FirstNet Authority directing AT&T
Okay,
to build.
thanks. Sheriff, you want to add anything, then I'll be done.
Yes, ma'am. I think that can be part of an uncomfortable conversation sometime, right? Because the reality is it's not based on the commercial market. It's based on what's best interest of the people we serve. I'm not going to suggest that it's perfect. I suggest it's getting there every day. And so I think by making these investments in rural and tribal areas, this is at the heart of what we should be about. It's at the heart of what FirstNet is about, that all people, all public safety, and all the citizens are entitled to these communications.
Yes, because the market probably wouldn't dictate a remote snowmobile trail
Sure, if we're
in
building,
Minnesota where they break down and they're in the middle of nowhere and they have to be able to call in, so. I
and it's a
appreciate
consistent
that.
need. Yeah.
That happens quite often, but I'm not going to go on. So thank you, and thank you to you, Mr. Davis, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Building off of Senator Klobuchar's first question, Sheriff Atkinson, the Commerce Department Inspector General previously found gaps in the board's oversight of performance metrics and milestones of FirstNet. FirstNet's initial response even challenged the IG's findings, asserting they were just working goals and not quantifiable metrics. So what new performance standards or monitoring methods has the board approved so that we can ensure compliance with contract terms and with the law?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As I stated before, there's 6 new board members, correct, that just came on this last October. And the first thing we did was go back through these Inspector General reports. There's obviously also 3 permanent members that are provide oversight to the board, which is OMB, the Department of Justice, and Department of Homeland Security, who are also obviously permanent members of that. We, as a board, started saying what performance measures matter. What performance measures are actual returns on investment, and started a working group to do that, to make sure that those things are being monitored, those things that matter, and we start asking some tough questions. I want to talk about the OIG specifically because I think this is important. You know, if you want to have accountability, you have to have authority. And I'm not a real fan of not being able to hold people that I give directions to accountable, because otherwise I'm simply suggesting. And I don't like suggesting, if I'm being blunt. I think there's a responsibility as tax stewards of the taxpayers' authority and money, these are taxpayers' funds in my opinion, that we as a board should be able to hold the executive director and or the authority staff accountable as appropriate. There has to be some level of accountability.
You mentioned that in your opening comments about when you were talking about changes as we reauthorize FirstNet. Could you wrap it up here? Senator Lujan's going to have one more question, or more than one, as we wait to see if other senators are coming. But can you hit those points for us again here at the end?
Yes, ma'am. I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. All 3 points in that regard real quick. Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I think there should be an expansion of the public safety seats on the board so that we don't lose what is the tenor and direction of what this board should be about. It's looking after the interest of public safety and making sure that doesn't become a secondary interest. So I think that should be codified. 2, the staggering of terms. So that we don't end up in a situation, you know, again, we have 6 new board members plus 2 current vacancies, and I'm actually just the acting chair at this point. Those are the kind of things that we need to give the Secretary of Department of Commerce the opportunity to make those corrections as appropriate. And I think that helps for continuity and consistency in government. 3, which is too many captains on this ship. We have to have the ability to make decisions that matter and hold accountable. If you're going to ask me to be accountable, I suggest that I need the authority to do that. And there's some clear things that I think we can go back that I can give you examples of where that was challenging.
As you look at the current statute, do you think that the performance benchmarks and device connection targets are being met?
I think there should be stricter, more outlined, and more defined performance measures that's in the best interest of the people we serve. Quite frankly, it's in the best interest of AT&T. Nobody loses with us being more accountable and having performance measures. It is the right thing to do.
Thank you, sir. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good questions. Mr. Agnew, what is FirstNet's presence in rural, tribal, and remote areas of New Mexico, and is coverage there truly sufficient?
Thank you for that question, Senator. We need continued build-out. While New Mexico has received significant build-out per the FirstNet program, there's more work that needs to be done, and there's a couple things that are being done. As I mentioned, the coverage workshops, where new sites are going to be built based off of your first responders. Additionally, we make available deployables so they can pull out their own coverage. We make it highly affordable, small form factors so they can deploy coverage where it doesn't exist. Finally, as I mentioned before, the partnership with AST, that is going to fill out much of the white space that is in Nebraska, or sorry, New Mexico, apologize. That is where we're going to be able to provide a layered approach to deliver that connectivity for New Mexico.
Mr. Agnew, if you don't have the percentage of the state that's covered or where the holes are, if you could just respond to that one in writing. New Mexico is one of the first states that adopted into FirstNet, if I'm not mistaken. We're one of the early adopters.
Yes.
We still have holes, man. I can tell you where I drive, where phones don't work, and I've got them all.
Right.
When I talk to local law enforcement agencies, some of my CDS comes from trying to help local law enforcement agencies. There's a fire chief that lives in a canyon, and once he gets past a certain mile marker, you can't find him. You cannot find him. You can't even bounce off of radios to get to this family. And this is in a mountainous area where a little fire kills people, devastates homes. And so I'm really interested here. And, with that being said, I'd be happy to work with the chair to look at the holes that exist across America in rural communities, and so that we can just get a better understanding of success, measuring success every year that we deploy, how we do better. Mr. Davis, same question to you.
Yeah, Senator, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, we're proud to support nearly 61% of the first responders in New Mexico. I know those challenges very well. I actually have a home in northern New Mexico and spend a lot of time there. With some of the things that we're doing a lot of the similar things. And I think what's important to understand here, at the end of the day, there is no separate network. There is no separate commercial. There is one commercial carrier that is providing these services for public safety. There are multiple carriers that are doing that today. I think that's important. That's why we're here. So if FirstNet is getting funding, we're looking at additional $15 billion over the next 25 years of the term, and they are to put a tower in that canyon, that tower should be able to cover all the public safety providers, not just AT&T customers. Because what we've seen in national outages and what we've seen in recent times is when there's an AT&T outage, FirstNet is out too. So there is no separate network, and everything is riding on AT&T's commercial network. And I think that's a good reminder for us and a good reminder for rural coverage that we all have to work together, and that's why it's important that we have competition in the marketplace.
Mr. Agnew, let me ask you a question that I presented earlier. Does technology exist today where if a first responder buys a phone, a communication device, can they ride all three networks with subscriptions? Or do they have to buy a phone from each carrier?
So thank you for that question, Senator. Today, the technology does exist where phones can use multiple SIM cards from carriers as well as routers.
But do they have to change the SIM card out, or does it just work?
There's two options. The routers just work. The SIM cards there's a configuration, but it's very simple to do, and it's very standard from a public safety perspective to have multiple SIMs within a specific device.
Sheriff, I'm clearly talking about something I don't understand, because I see several heads in the room, not in either against me or with Mr. Agnew here, if you will. Is this widely known? Are we seeing agencies across the country rather, because look, when I'm back home and I'm talking to folks, they're rolling with 3-4 phones, man. And is this widely known? Because it sounds like it'd be a savings.
Well, I've got 3 phones, so I'm not sure how that helps. No, I mean, pragmatically, yes, it is widely known. It is well known, and it's not uncommon for agencies. When you hear these folks talking about the number of agencies, 40,000 agencies, we got 30,000 agencies. Well, maybe my math's not that good, but there's a limited number of public safety agencies in this country, right? Yeah. The reality of it is many organizations use multiple lines based on what's in their best need. And you're never going to hear the authority, the board, tell somebody to go away from a service if we're not able to provide it yet. Right. I don't want, Rousseau said it perfect, right? Which is don't let perfect be the enemy of better. We're getting there, but we're not going to endanger somebody's life by telling you to drop your service when we're not providing adequate service yet. The goal is to get to providing adequate service, but to your major point, it is not uncommon for people to use multiple lines.
Amen to that. Last question that well, my time's expired here, so we can please respond. Just a follow-up that I have is, if you could respond to me, both Mr. Agnew and Mr. Davis, is if law enforcement knows that there's a hole somewhere and they have a subscription to either of you, what do they do to report to you all that there's a hole?
Right.
Side by side to that, if I have a constituent that goes and buys a phone based on the maps that you all presented, and the phone don't work, right, what do they need to do to respond to the company to say, hey, the map said I have coverage here, I don't have coverage, you need to fix this? So if you all could respond to that.
Very quickly, the direct relationships between the FirstNet consultants and your public safety agencies, that there's a direct relationship there to report the coverage, also with the FirstNet Authority and those covered workshops to document it, and then we subsequently provide updates. We are accountable, we're bound by the contract to provide those updates. We're bound by the contract to provide that build-out plan. So it's full awareness, and if there's any public safety officials in your state that are not aware of that, please let them know that it is available to them.
I appreciate that. Madam Chair, I'm reminded of that app that the FCC created when they were trying to fix these maps that were horrible. I used it a time or two when devices weren't working. I just don't know if something equivalent exists or still exists for the others. So that's what I'm looking to just try to help more folks,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. In fact, I was going to follow up with it before I recognize Senator Sullivan on the maps that are available to the FCC and to the public at large. I would just ask each of you, yes or no, are they worth anything? Go ahead, Sheriff.
Absolutely. It's going to show you the overall, right? But how good in particular that coverage is, that's questionable, right? I think that's always something that could be improved. I'm kind of a trust but verify individual when it comes to that, so that's an individual.
Mr. Agnew.
It provides directional coverage, but with FirstNet, we actually provide much different layers that actually show in-building, outdoor, more specificity before a first responder comes on. So there's much more that a public safety.
So FirstNet is which we've already established, is more reliable than your commercial service.
That's right, with the priority preemption, correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis.
The answer is yes, but I think there's still more work to do.
Yay, thank you. Mr. Maier.
We call that drive testing in the field. You go out and you check and you verify. I do want to note that for Senator Lujan, I have a phone here that has 2 SIMs in it, one on one carrier, one on the other. And if I could put 3 on it, I'd use all 3. Get one device, sir.
Can I have 30 seconds to respond to that? I think it's important, that's why we're here, right? There's going to be $15 billion going to the FirstNet Authority over the next 25 years. There's a lot of rural departments, Taos, New Mexico, for example, that can't afford 2 SIMs. It would be great if that money went back to the public safety agencies instead of going to one commercial provider to build out their network.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I think Senator Lujan and I should do road trips in New Mexico, and then he comes to Nebraska, and we'll do it in Nebraska. And we'll include Alaska in this as we travel our very sparsely populated areas of the state, and we can tell you exactly where we can do calls. Thank you. Senator Sullivan, you are
Thank
recognized.
you, Madam Chair. You're always welcome to Alaska, as you know. And I want to thank the witnesses. It's a really important topic, and I want to thank the chair and the ranking member for holding this hearing. So I want to talk a little bit about some lessons learned on the issues of really remote areas, like my state, like the ranking member and chair's state, and what we learned from the Maui wildfires, because I think there's a lot of lessons learned. So, you know, my state, the great state of Alaska, has benefited from meaningful FirstNet investments and strong response efforts by AT&T and FirstNet response operations groups. But I think the Maui wildfires show that plans and assets must be demonstrably ready before a disaster occurs, especially in remote, challenging regions of the country. And I'd like all the witnesses' views on this. Do you agree that for remote states, but I guess it's really for all states, but in particularly remote big states like mine, that the public safety communications disaster recovery plans must be proven through exercises and logistics testing, not just written commitments? Because I think what happened in Maui is you had all these great written commitments, but there was nothing that was Hawaii-specific in the protocols. And I'm now looking at the OIG report that came out, and that the FirstNet Authority approved AT&T's business continuity and disaster recovery plan just 2 months before the Maui wildfires, and yet that plan failed miserably, I think. So can I get everybody's view on that? It's a really important issue. Don't just have a written plan. Hey, this looks good. You got to go test it, especially in a place like my state. It's very remote, very rugged. What's the view on, from all the witnesses, and then what can we, you know, that was just such a horrible tragedy in Maui, my God. But you know, what's the silver lining on lessons learned from that? Because I think there's a bunch, and the OIG report certainly has some.
Yeah. So, Senator,
I'll leave it up to any, all four of you.
Yeah, Senator, thank you. And you're right, it was a tragedy. And let me just start with saying oversight's good for the program. It drives continued growth and innovation, so we meet public safety's needs. And FirstNet is really the only provider with this healthy oversight and is contractually bound to deliver for public safety. So let's talk about learnings. I've been to your state. I've performed public safety exercises in your state, Juneau, Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, working with public safety. I personally know.
By the way, just real quick, those are the big populated areas.
Right,
We had a typhoon that smashed into western Alaska a few months ago in these remote villages on the western part of our state. That, I mean, that's where I really want you to.
Right.
I mean, I want you doing exercises in Juneau and Anchorage, don't get me wrong, but I want you to be doing exercises in some of the most remote parts of America that have been really severely impacted by extreme weather.
Right. So to that end, you made a commentary, you're so far from the mainland, so you have to be self-sufficient. So the business continuity and disaster recovery plans and the resources, you have to be able to self-sustain before the cavalry comes. We take the OIG report very seriously. It is that roadmap for improvement. So let's focus on Maui. Maui had a device, had a deployable on site. It was deployed within 24 hours. We subsequently sent 30 devices, but what I said was subsequently sent, right? It needs to withstand now. So what we've done is we've tripled the amount of assets on each of the islands. So now we can respond much faster. We've coordinated with National Guard and the Hawaii Emergency EOC to receive priority on barges and airlift, so if deployables need to move between the islands. from an Alaska perspective, because that learning didn't just stop at Hawaii. It's now the territories. It's the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's Puerto Rico. It's Alaska, where we have to operate differently and deploy more assets. So we've actually doubled the assets in Alaska and continuing. We're updating and will continue to update our business continuity disaster recovery plans to continue to show what we're doing there. But to answer your question directly about testing it, not just putting on paper, yes. And that's why we have a dedicated ROG team with that specific responsibility to coordinate with your state. This is Alaska, this is Hawaii, this is North Carolina, this is New Mexico and Nebraska. We're required to coordinate that effort, so thank you.
Good, that's a good answer. Anyone else have a view on that? I'm sure you all do, but it's a really important question.
Yeah, very important question, Senator. And the tragedy in Maier was just devastating. And this is exactly why we're here and exactly why the reliance on a single network provider is a risk to public safety and something that we just cannot afford. So, from our perspective, the only true service of last resort is redundancy. Yeah. So disaster plans must be tested physically, not just contractually. Our contract is with our network and our customers, not a federal mandate. But more importantly, public safety agencies need access to multiple networks. If the primary network fails, whether due to a wildfire, a fiber cut, or a cyber attack, Alaska's first responders need to be able to immediately switch to another carrier.
Good. And by the way, my state, we get a lot of natural disasters, right? Earthquakes, wildfires, tsunamis, you name it, we get them. So it's really important. Any other thoughts on this? I know I'm over time, but it's an important question.
Just a short note to say that networks, when they're overloaded, damaged, or simply unavailable, it's a problem. First responders have to communicate with each other and communicate with the public. And we believe at APCO International, our members do this every day, is that we plan. We plan with redundancies. We have multiple ways to communicate. These may be land mobile radios, it may be high frequency radios, it could be multiple carriers, a mix of technologies that really is field tested. You talked about scenarios. Scenarios exist today that you can tabletop, but how do they work in the field?
Yeah.
Allow the first responders to work out in the field to find those gaps, identify them, make corrections. You'll have more successful outcomes.
Good. Sheriff, you want to wrap it up here?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, the state of Florida handles its fair share of natural disasters as well, too. And one of the things that we know and have learned that I think the authority as a board is pushing for is this concept of critical complement, which is what needs to be done after these after-action reports. A, is it predictable? If it's predictable, it's preventable, right?
Yeah.
B, is it a practical application of resources where it's at? So we can have all the resources in the world, but if they're only in DC, they're not doing anybody any good. So I think what we've learned as we step up these after-action reports is that there has to be at least a critical complement for all areas of the country. I think that's a build-out process. I'm not going to tell you it's perfect today because it's not, but that is part and parcel of learning from these national disasters.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan, and thank you to all of our witnesses for their testimony here today. Senator Lujan, thank you, and I look forward to working with you and with all of our colleagues to work together on this important issue as we look forward to the reauthorization of FirstNet. Senators will have until the close of business on February 4th to submit questions for the record. The witnesses will have until the close of business on February 18th to respond to those questions. This concludes today's hearing, and with that, the committee stands adjourned.